Jonathan, and hello to all who are participating in this live session. You know, it's a great joy to be with our members of the NCEA all around the country. I think there may be about 8,000 who have registered for this event. So it's fabulous to be a part of it. I know we've been really blessed with the three keynotes that we've heard so far. Father Schmitz, who reminded us of God's great love for each one of us. He knows us by name. And Brother Guy Cosamagno, who actually lives here in Tucson, where I live, as part of the Vatican Observatory, just a very bright man, full of passion and enthusiasm, which is really what a teacher needs to be. And Gloria Purvis today talking about racism and how it has diminished so much of our country's history, but hopefully we're coming to address it. So I'm delighted to be with you today to talk a little bit about our Holy Father, Pope Francis, who, as you know, serves as our Holy Father and who has taught us so much, especially by his example, going to Lampedusa, going to Iraq recently. He has been a great model of what it means to be a servant leader, which is what all of us are trying to be as teachers, as principals, as superintendents, as educators. So it's a great privilege to talk a little bit about something that most people haven't really looked at, is Pope Francis's insight for Catholic educators. I think all of us know that Pope Francis is a Jesuit, and Jesuits are teachers. We have so many Catholic colleges, high schools who are run by our Jesuit communities. And being a teacher, being a Jesuit, he has a deep interest and enthusiasm for Catholic education. One of the things that clearly Francis likes to do is to teach. He regards Catholic educators in the highest respect, because being an educator is a role, but he says being a teacher is a passion. And I think that's what we've seen a little bit in our keynotes during these days. What makes a great teacher? I think many teachers are good presenters, many teachers have good visuals, but a great teacher, like a great actor, is someone who has a wide variety of ways to bring about a message. And Pope Francis uses many, many methods to bring about his mission. He not only presents, but he witnesses, and he shows by example what he's trying to teach. I hope all of us as Catholic educators have a wide range of ways that we can break open the subjects that we're teaching. We can't just be one way. Now, where are we getting these ideas about Pope Francis's insights for Catholic educators? I don't know if you know this, but when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, every year he made a presentation to Catholic educators in the Archdiocese of Buenos Aires. And he also made every year a presentation to catechists in his archdiocese. All of the talks that our Archbishop Bergoglio made while he was Archbishop in Buenos Aires have been put together in a 3-volume work titled, "In Your Eyes, I See My Words." And it contains a wide range of subjects about which Francis spoke about when he was Archbishop in Buenos Aires. We can also glean some of his insights about Catholic education in his post-synodal exhortation. You know, a post-synodal exhortation is a document that the Holy Father writes after a synod. And his post-synodal exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel, is full of insights for Catholic educators, as well as Laudato Si, which Brother Guy spoke about in his keynote address, and his most recent encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, how to find joy and happiness in life by being of service to others. Also, his latest book, Let Us Dream, contains some of his thoughts and ideas of what we can do to make Catholic education what it's intended to be. So what is Pope Francis's invitation to us today in this workshop? I think what he would say to us is, come, let us talk this over. Let us dare to dream. I know all of us are very proud of what our Catholic educators did during this pandemic. We did things we never expected we could do, which just is an encouragement to us to keep looking, keep dreaming, keep talking. That's why this convention of NCA is so important. It brings us together to talk together, to dream together, to have new insights together. And that's certainly what Francis is encouraging us to do. I think he'd be delighted with the NCA convention because Catholic educators are talking together, they're listening together, they're studying together, they're learning new things together. So what's Pope Francis's primary message to us as Catholic educators? I think it comes down to two words: you matter. You see, in the eyes of Francis, teaching is a significant relationship that leaves our students for better or for worse, and that cumulatively. You know, every day that we get up, every morning, when a teacher meets with a student, Francis says, a new story begins. You leave every student you work with, for better or for worse. We heard Gloria Purvis today talking about teachers who left her for the worse. Little respect for her, little regard for the gifts she had. And we heard Brother Guy speak about some of the teachers that he remembers from grade school. I remember Sister Fatima. We usually call her Fabs, our 8th grade teacher. She was a great teacher, and she left me for better. And you do that for each one of your students. Let's pray your students will remember you when they're the age of Brother Guy. In his writings, Pope Francis has been clearly aware that 2020, as all of us know, was an extraordinarily difficult year, a year of suffering that caused forced isolation and exclusion. Not easy for any of us. Spiritual anguish, and of course, many deaths. Francis comments that it has also caused an unprecedented educational crisis, one that we're in the throes of right now, because for so long, our young people have had either a hybrid experience or a virtual experience, or perhaps no experience. More than 1 billion children, Francis says, have faced disruptions to their education, which will leave many seriously behind. And how, as Catholic educators, are we going to address this? One of the wonderful things about Catholic schools is many of them stayed open as much as possible during these times. It was recently to a group of ambassadors that Pope Francis referred to an educational catastrophe. You know, Francis has spoke about other pandemics, hunger, the environment. There are many things that are diminishing human life all around us. And all of these things cumulatively have created in Francis's mind an educational catastrophe. He challenges us to renew our commitment to an education that engages society at every level. Education, he says, is in fact a natural antidote to the individualistic culture that at times generates into a true cult of the self and the primacy of indifference. If our Catholic schools are doing anything, they're helping us to see that we are one family, that all belong, that everybody is a child of God. And we can't live a life of individualism. It's about me, but what I can do for others. This is the heart of what we do in our Catholic schools. He marvels at how our Catholic educators have responded. And I shared that with you. And I know at the NCA, our board talks about that and has talked about it in deep gratitude for how our Catholic educators have stepped up and continued the process of education despite all the challenges. As we enter the crisis of COVID, as I'm sure you've heard often during this convention, our categories and ways of thinking got shaken up. And something good happens when we're shaken up. We have to look for new possibilities. There's an educational term called tinkering, which is trying things, experimenting with things, seeing what works. Some of it won't be successful, but some of it will. You don't come out of it the same. And this is certainly true for our Catholic schools. It's a moment to dream big, to rethink our priorities, what we value, what we want, what we seek. And I know NCA wants very much to work with all of our superintendents and our principals and teachers to rethink our priorities and see what we value, what we want, what we seek. The second thing Francis says to you as educators is that teaching is a vocation, a call to greatness. This Holy Father knows the importance of teachers. He sees it as a call from God. Our bishops entrust a major and essential part of the Church's mission to Catholic educators. They have trust that you will be the presence of the Church in your classroom, in your school, in the network of schools that make up your dioceses. It's your job, it's your responsibility, it's in your hands that the faith will be handed on and our young people will be prepared to contribute to our society. Teaching, educating, making people grow, Francis says, although it is work, and we know it's work, it's challenging, it's not easy. It is work that transcends the model of pure work for hire. This isn't just a job, Francis says. It's a call. It's a mission. It exceeds just working for pay. You know, work is our contribution to life. And certainly teachers and principals and superintendents, what a gift you are in how you contribute to our society. To educate, Pope Francis says, is to commit oneself to working in one of the most important ways of promoting the human person and its dignity. In Fratelli Tutti, he reminds us that the human person is too often diminished, lowered, forgotten about the dignity that is ours. And that our Catholic schools are supposed to envision that people with disability, people of every color and race and language, all of us are part of the human family, daughters and sons of God. Catholic educators, Francis says, keep alive the hope of a new humanity. You know, there are so many things wrong with our society today, and it's in our teaching of our young people that they will have the dreams and the hopes to build a society of justice and peace. Little by little, poco a poco. You know that every day in your classrooms or even on the screen, my great niece is a preschool teacher, and she said it's hilarious teaching preschool virtually. The kids are hiding under the desk or they're playing games. But you know, whether virtually or in person, every day you're faced with the boys and girls of flesh and blood with very real possibilities. This is the future, as you know. Many desires, fears, and needs, each child an individual, you know that. Children who are there in body and spirit, just as they are in front of an adult, demanding, hoping, criticizing, pleading in their own way, needy, terrified, continually trusting in you, even though their faces might sometimes show indifference. You matter, for better or for worse, even though you may wonder sometimes, and the kids might seem so indifferent or aloof. They're watching to see if anyone offers them something different, something of value, something that they can take with them. We heard Brother Guy talk about what he took from his teachers and what he learned from them. The Catholic educator is a person also, not only who matters, not only who has a vocation and a calling, but is a person of encounter. You see, you're in a relationship, and it's that relationship, even more than your subject, that matters most. You are the one who nourishes, inspires, grows, consolidates our sent on mission. Francis says there is one who knows the way and another who lets oneself be led. And we know, as I know as a bishop and as I always felt as a priest, I receive so much from people. I've learned so much about what holiness is from people in parishes and the diocese where I've been privileged to serve. And I know that's your experience as well as a Catholic educator. You receive from the students. The beautiful task of education, Francis says, is a reciprocal one. It's a relationship. We educate and we let ourselves be educated. I wonder if you'd think about something you learned from a student that you teach. I'm sure we could spend the rest of the day talking about what we've learned. Education is dialogue, Francis says. Catholic educators need to have a heart that is open enough to let us be surprised every day by the creativity of a child or a lesson. You know, it's tough every day to be in the classroom. But if we only let ourselves be surprised every day, what a beautiful expression Francis has given us. Catholic educators need to have a receptive and humble heart to see the freshness of a child or an adolescent. Francis says, every day, every morning, you have to invent new ways of recognizing, of loving your students and promoting mutual recognition. Maybe that's why NCEA is so important in its convention. It kind of unites us, it inspires us, as is the theme of NCEA. And it's not easy every day to invent new ways of recognizing and loving your students. The teacher is one who loves and teaches the difficult task of loving every day by setting an example, telling ourselves that the other is always, always worthy of our love. As Catholic educator, do I have a receptive and humble heart to see the freshness of a child? You know, one of the beautiful accounts in the gospel is the story about the apostles wondering where they're going to have enough to feed the thousands of people that were gathered there. And a child came up and said, well, I have 5 loaves and 2 fish. What great good we can do with very little. Let us be surprised every day by the creativity and contribution of our children. Great teachers are surprised every day, and they bond with their students in a relationship that draws out the best in them. Francis says, if we're going to encounter our students, we have to have a deep listening. Some people say few people really hear or listen to others. The teacher must be a deep listener. The most experienced teacher, confident in their successful ways of teaching, find the adolescent's world dark and distant. There's a workshop at this time about young people, teenagers, and how do we understand who they are and where they're coming from. It's not easy. We find an adolescent who devalues school knowledge and a teacher who does not know the adolescent's questions. This, Francis says, is a disencounter. If you're going to encounter your students, you have to know their name, who they are, what's important to them, what they're struggling with. And it's not easy because most of us are teaching a number of students, but each one of them is someone that deserves deep listening. Most likely they don't get that at home or from others. Young people often fail to find responses to their concerns, needs, and problems. You know, one of the great challenges for us as a church today is this new generation. They speak a different language. They have different perspectives, different attitudes. And we haven't listened deeply enough to understand where they're coming from and how what the church is saying and what the church is teaching can be made understandable and important to them. As adults, we find it hard to listen patiently to them, to appreciate their concerns and demands, and to speak to them a language they can understand. So Francis is saying you matter. Francis is saying you are called to a mission, not just a job. Francis is saying you're a person of encounter, forming a relationship and a bond for better or for worse with your students. And Francis is saying we have to be a deep listener and we have to show that we understand. Now, Francis proposes in his writings what I gleaned out as 6 objectives for our work with the young. 1, to awaken memory. So he has a deep concern that the new generation has lost its memory. It doesn't listen to the elders. You know, among our Native Americans, the elder is highly respected. For many today, the past is of no interest, only the present, only the future. But Francis reminds us as teachers that we have to instill and awaken memory in our students to listen to and retelling our people's stories. I was in Marrakesh one time, and there's a big square there called Jebel El Fana. And in each corner of that square, every evening in the twilight, there is a storyteller sharing with the little ones the history of their people, who they are, where they've come from, what they've struggled with. We need to awaken memory. Secondly, he says we help live the present as a gift and experience joy. Now, this is a very important notion to Francis, joy, gaudium. That's the heart of his document, his post-synodal exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. He says we're much too somber in our living of the faith. To develop the faculty of critical judgment. This is something so important for our young people that they go into the future being able to judge. Today, there are so many conspiracies theories, silly ideas that people propose. We need people who are able to judge what makes a difference, what matters, what is the truth, and to promote acceptance and integration of one's bodily reality. You know, our young people have to learn what it means to be human and the gift of their body, to consolidate social values and to insist on preaching the kerygma means knowing that God loved me and gave himself up for me. That was Father Schmidt's primary message, the heart of the kerygma, that God knows me and loves me and gave himself up for me. He is living at my side every day to enlighten and strengthen me. What are the characteristics of an effective teacher? And I invite you to think about whether any of these qualities are a part of you and part of your teaching. One is enthusiasm, the model of the interested life, to have a zest for life. Deo Gratias was a person who was trying to pass on the faith, and he said to St. Augustine, How am I going to teach these rudes, these ignorant ones? And Augustine said, you've got to have enthusiasm, because enthusiasm shows that what you're teaching means something to you, and you want it to mean something to the student. An effective teacher, Francis says, is one who challenges students. You know, some of our best teachers are the ones who pushed us the hardest. Some of our best coaches are those who pushed us the hardest. A great teacher, an effective teacher, is one who enjoys their subject, translates their passion to students, a person of reassuring kindness and a desire to be helpful. Someone who can cultivate a passionate interest in the young people. Certainly, Brother Guy has developed from his teachers a passionate interest in astronomy, in God's creation. Read the shifting needs of learners, spiritual presence and personal availability. We all know a teacher who makes oneself available and being a living icon of the truth you teach. This is Francis's primary way of teaching, to witness. Our work in Catholic schools is really to prepare the young to live a dignified and fulfilling life, move away from self-absorption, to reach out to others and seek their good. Life grows by being given away. The one who loses their life, Christ said, finds it. But the one who holds on to our life, well, that person loses it. Society does not teach this, but we must. Society teaches we need to climb the ladder to achieve power and success and prestige. But that's not the message of our Catholic schools. Our message is we must live a dignified and fulfilling life. What does Francis say we need as teachers to be? Be, first of all, mentors of a new way of living, a life lived for others. Be mentors of the sacred, to be able to look beneath the surface, to listen to the heavenly music, which most people cannot hear. Be mentors of silence and reflection. You know, our young people need to learn to reflect, to pause, to get away. I remember meeting one student who went on a retreat and they weren't allowed to take their phones. And I said, what did you learn from the retreat? I learned I could live without my cell phone. How realistic that is. Be mentors of gratitude, that all I am and all I have is a gift from God. Be mentors of justice and peace, calling the young to do something significant with their lives, not to waste their lives. And be mentors of prayer and reflection. Another way that Francis challenges us as teachers is what he says, we need to be bold and creative. Teaching cannot cling to the stale certainties. Teachers need to be bold and faithful. Some people are upset with Pope Francis because he is bold. He is faithful. You know, if all we are is bold, we'll be cut off from our moorings and be hopelessly adrift. And if all we are is faithful, well, we're going to become obsolete. Francis models being both bold and faithful. Both are important. And we as teachers need to try to do the same. The challenge of being creative demands that we be suspicious of any speech, thought, assertion, or proposal that presents itself as the only way possible. There is always another possibility. Being creative is to state that there is always an opening somewhere. It is precisely schools inspired by Christian faith that should least give in to resignation. That's how it works. Or so-and-so is hopeless. That's not who we are as Catholic schools, Francis says. We need to be creative. Creative schools are open to new things. What about your classroom? What about your school? Have you done anything in the last year or 2 or 3 besides the virtual movement that we've been forced to by COVID to do something different, new, surprising? Be schools that are rooted in truth, which is always, Francis says, surprising. He likes that word. Our schools should never aspire to build a hegemonic army of Christians who will know all the answers. They should instead be places where all questions are welcomed, where by the light of the gospel, the search for personal fulfillment is actually encouraged. You know, our young people have so many questions. We can't dismiss those questions. We can't ignore those questions. We have to listen and dialogue with them about their questions. Why are we educating in our Catholic schools, Francis says? Why does the church and the Christian communities invest time, goods, and effort in a task that is not directly religious? Why do we have schools? It is to exert influence on society and to foster hope for a new humanity, for another possible world. Christian contribution is an education that testifies to and creates another way of being human. If only we understood the task entrusted to us, the mission given to us. Catholic schools are places that hand on Christian wisdom. The gospel of Jesus offers us truth about God and about us. We teach a God who is Father, a God who comes to meet his people, a free and liberating God who chooses, calls, and sends. This is the God we teach in our schools. If our schools are not the space where another humanity is being created, where another wisdom takes room, where society is formed, where there is room for hope, transcendence, we are delaying the unique contribution we can make as Catholic educators. One word that is very common in Francis's writing, both as Archbishop of Buenos Aires and now as Pope, is accompany. The Catholic educator accompanies the student along the path. Education is a dialogue and engagement. To engage in dialogue is to share the past, searching for the truth, searching for the truth. You know, three challenges that face the young today are discontinuity, uprooting, and the disappearance of main certainties that secure life, leaving the young with a sense of orphanhood. I think you see that in the students you teach. Our schools need to be places of hospitality, Francis says, and affection. That does not mean that we lay aside our mission to educate. Education must be carried out seriously. The development of human bonds of affection and tenderness is the remedy for uprootedness experienced by so many. I hope our schools are places where our young people experience the bond of affection. Coherence between what is said and what is done as teachers can reduce the student's sense of discontinuity. We know we must witness what we say. The effort to generate some basic certainties in a sea of the relative and the fragmentary consists of learning to discover the other's questions, to contemplate them, and to intuit them. Basic securities and certainties have been taken away. And how do we help our young people in a relatively changing world? And finally, he's talking about making our schools open, especially to the poor. I know that's been a struggle, but so essential in Francis's mind. Our mission as Catholic educators is to actively opt for inclusion, to work toward inclusion. We need to take education to the most forgotten. That's a big challenge for us. Our schools need to take another look and make sure that nobody has been left out or forgotten. Wasn't it one of the church's earliest practices to take education to the most forgotten, those on the margins and on the periphery? We must have a truly inclusive and universal mentality. I want to stop there and sharing some of Francis's insights. Perhaps we have a few minutes for questions you may have. And I encourage you to read Francis's writings. There's so much there for us to glean as Catholic educators. It wasn't always written for us as educators, but it has much to say to us as educators.
Thanks so much, Bishop. Just taking a look at some of the questions we have in the session, and feel free, if you have any comments, feel free to put those in the messaging, or if there's any more questions you have, feel free to throw that in the questions box. We have one from Jess about vocation. She's asking how to appropriately balance my essential vocation as a wife and mother with my important vocation as a teacher.
Well, it's obviously a both and, Jeff. We have a vocation to be a mother, to be a father. Probably one of the greatest gifts. You know, Francis has made this year the year of Joseph. And he did it to highlight the role of fatherhood. He saw Joseph as a model of an obedient father, a loving and kind father, an accepting father, a courageously creative father. And so the vocation of parenthood is certainly part of what is our call, but also our call to be an educator, which is not unlike being a father or mother. You know, in the old categories, mothers were always empathic, encouraging, supportive. Fathers were to be demanding and challenging. Obviously, it's a combination of both that a teacher embraces in trying to be an effective teacher. So both are a call, a vocation.
Another one here, Tim is asking, can you please share recommendations for reading materials?
Well, certainly with regard to Francis, I think it would be a good place to start with his latest book, Let Us Dream, which is a kind of a personal reflection of his on his document Fratelli Tutti, what it sort of means to him and what he hopes it means for us. That book is not hard to read, and it's very acceptable and very adaptable. And I would encourage you to read some of his writings, because he is a person who teaches not only by his writing. Benedict was, of course, a great writer, but also by his example. And so to look at various ways, to watch Francis, to look at what he does, what his initiatives are. You know, people were quite concerned about his trip to Iraq, but he said, I need to be there to show these people some hope. And even though it was a terrible time with the COVID, even though it's a very dangerous time, he went. And that message of going, being with, accompanying those struggling means a lot. So to look at, if you're wondering what to embrace Francis's teaching, read his documents, but watch him.
And there's another question Sister Agnes has here. Do you have any recommendations for how to handle some of the divisions that we see both politically in the country and also in the church?
I think, Sister Agnes, you're hitting upon one of the most discouraging parts of our life today, and that is the polarity that exists throughout society, in the church and certainly in our society. And I would say that perhaps what's needed is what Francis told us as teachers: deep listening. You know, sometimes we think people think, act, and feel the way I do. That's a false premise. The reality is people think, act, and feel differently than I do. And the point is to understand what is that difference. Francis speaks about trying to listen to one another to come to a new perspective, a new reality, not a compromise, but something new. You know, at the Amazon Synod, they were talking about whether there should be married deacons who become priests, or whether we can have women deacons. And the Synod participants were arguing back and forth. And Francis didn't take a position because he felt that they had not really listened enough to each other to understand their differences, to come to a new perspective that comes out of deep listening. So I think one of the things we need to do, and it's not easy because we know we like what we believe and what we understand to be the right way, but to listen to the other and see if we can come to a new understanding through dialogue.
Gabrielle is asking if we can get a copy of the presentation. And Bishop, I think we can connect after this and we can put maybe a link to this slide deck in the description. Does that
Sure,
work?
it's all yours. Whoever would like to use it, you'd be most welcome.
Great, so we'll get that to you, Gabriella. Thanks for the question. And if any other viewers are interested in that, we'll put a link to that in the description for this session. Great. And feel free, we have a couple minutes here. If you have any more questions, feel free to let us know in the questions box or any comments in the messaging. And kind of as we near the end, Bishop, do you have any other things you'd like us to keep in mind?
A couple of things, I think. One is how proud the board of NCA is about the work of our staff, and especially Kathy Mears, who is our interim president. As you know, we are welcoming a new president now, Lincoln Schneider from Sacramento, who will be coming on board on July 1st. And to all our Catholic educators, to know that NCA exists really for you, to resource you, to support you, to advocate on your behalf. And I think this convention is an example of what NCA has the capabilities of doing in terms of igniting and uniting and inspiring us in the tremendous vocation that God has given us. Never doubt the value you have and the importance of our Catholic schools. It's absolutely critical for the mission of the church. And again, I hope that our new president, just as Kathy has done, will be doing some deep listening to our Catholic leaders around the country on how we can really look at being even more creative in addressing the challenges of our time. Because one of the biggest challenges the church faces is understanding and accompanying our young people as they learn about the faith. For most of our young people, well, I shouldn't say most, but certainly for many, too many, faith is indifferent. It's not important to them. And one thing is you can embrace the faith, one is you can hate the faith, but the hardest thing to address is indifference. And how do we help our young people to see the value of our faith?
Well, thanks so much for your time, Bishop. Those are all the questions and comments we have at the moment. There's a lot of thank yous in the messaging, so we appreciate your time. And just a reminder, we'll be sharing a survey in just a moment. So we encourage you to give us your feedback there.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, and thanks to all who participated. I certainly would welcome any feedback that you have and hope that the next few days, today and tomorrow, will be filled with a lot of energy. Now, being virtual is not the same as being in person, certainly. And I hope perhaps next year we'll be able to gather at least in a hybrid way so that some of us can really be together and enjoy one another's company, which has been one of the greatest blessings of the NCA convention. Stay well, stay safe. And as we say in Spanish, sigan adelante, keep going. God bless.
Great. Thanks so much, Bishop.